Hey everyone, I'm Anso and you're in my design studio. Today we are shooting a follow-up video on the AROS project. Since we shot the last episode in the AROS, we've had launch, restock, we've had a whole bunch of crazy situations, and I can safely say that the past 2 months has been the most hectic and stressful. I've been swinging from ecstatic joy to despair. I've been all over the map emotionally, and now about 5 weeks after launch, I can finally sit back and actually talk about this. It has been a roller coaster ride that I can't even begin to imagine how I got through this. So just to put you through a timeline, we shot the last episode on November 20th. The actual launch happened on December 7th, but that launch date moved 3 times because of the situation going on in the shop. Everything was chaotic. My goals for the launch, I had to adjust that as we went. And just to make things a little more interesting, we went on a family vacation in Oxford, England, right before launch, which was planned to be right after launch, but things change, right? To begin with, I had a vision that said, I want to launch this project with 100 pieces. The AROS is shop built, which means that this is a knife built in my shop by my team, or the majority of the knife is built by my team. The intention is that it should all be built by my team. And the whole reason for doing this is I wanted to take my part out of the process, because constantly I become the bottleneck. Every single time that a process is dependent on me, I'm the bottleneck, and there's only so many hours in the day that I can't meet demand, I can't meet expectations from my customers and myself for the projects that I need to be making. I have so many ideas that I want to put out there for you, and if I'm constantly the bottleneck, that simply won't happen. On November 20th, we shot the last episode, and I was so optimistic about the process. Everything was just smooth sailing. I planned to have 100 pieces ready for launch date. Later on, I adjusted that number to 60. We were facing several difficulties in production. We were seeing some challenges with the precision, with the tolerances, but also since we moved me away from the bottleneck, new bottlenecks would happen, which is only normal. When you touch one thing in a line in production and you remove one bottleneck, something else will hold things back. And we actually discovered that the next bottleneck was something that I've never experienced before in the 14 years I've been running a CNC. The machines became the bottleneck. The machining time became the bottleneck. Because of the complex construction of the AROS and all the different parts, we were looking at massive machining time on each part. And simply the amount of parts that we could get out was limited. Then put on top of that, we were discovering that every now and again some parts came out with small variations in tolerances. Variations in tolerances is just unacceptable in a product like the AROS, where I'm producing a higher number of knives and each part needs to be interchangeable. The chassis and the handle scales need to fit together on this one, but also on the 100th AROS down the line. One of the goals with the AROS, and I've done projects like this before, is there should be no individual fitting of the parts. Once we've produced every single part, they should be able to be put together. In order to handle that kind of production, we just had to look very different in how we was doing production. But what we were facing was that after, say, 10 hours of machining, and we are machining 6 sets of chassis, we had to just dump them in the trash because of a slight variation in a chamfer, which would obviously be a visual mistake, but that visual mistake was hiding a mechanical mistake because you had something that shifted. And we are talking about just a couple of hundredths of a millimeter, which is roughly 1/1000 of an inch. So, okay, backtrack a little here. I wrote my body less George just to be able to sound just mildly educated when I'm talking about imperial measurements in machining. I work in millimeters, and Les and myself have had this friendly banter back and forth with how metric and imperial measurements are competing against each other. And I know that I'm winning. Les thinks he's winning, but I let him think that. Anyway, we're talking about a fraction of an inch, 1/1000 of an inch variation can cause problems down the line that you maybe won't see or recognize until you're in assembly phase. And that's catastrophic for a production like this. So here we actually have one of the bottlenecks that we had to do something about. Back here we have my laser, or actually now it's one of my lasers. Sounds fancy, huh? This is a combined CO2 and fiber laser, so I have been able to use this both for cutting and engraving cardboard and leather, but also metals like steel and titanium. So for the AROS project, we are doing the packaging material, so we're engraving that, but also, and we've been doing that for a number of years now, but we also did the blade engraving with the Anso logo and the steel type here. And the thing with the fiber laser is that it's a somewhat slow process, and that was starting to create a bottleneck. So we had to plan, okay, so if we plan to sell X amount of knives on Thursday, we need X amount of cardboard boxes for shipping. So right before Christmas, I actually went out and then bought a galvo laser that's sitting here, and that engraves both the backspacer with the serial number, and it will engrave the blade front and back with the logo and the steel type. And now we have a dedicated machine to do all the blade engraving, which is fantastic because, among other things, this is just a super fast process now with this machine. What would take several minutes before is now a matter of seconds. Remove one bottleneck and you create a new one. But now, at least in the laser department, we got that solved for now. In the past 2 months, I've revised so many things. I've revised the way we machine, the way we measure, the way we quality control, and it's a constant process of revising everything. Everything that I thought we knew, we had to relearn and rethink. I see all this as challenges, and with each challenge, I learn a ton. But I can tell you that in the past 2 months, I've learned more than I need for a good while. It's all good now, but man, I was so stressed out. In the end, we reached launch day, December 7th, and we unrolled this whole media campaign. I say media campaign, that sounds a bit more than it was, but we spent so much time unrolling a strategy for Instagram, for Facebook, for our newsletter, just to build up anticipation around the product and the launch. So while it might have been a good idea to push launch even more, people were waiting. So at very close to the 7th, I decided, okay, we launch with whatever we have. And at that point, I thought maybe we have to launch with 25 knives, but so be it. Then we launch, and then we can start working on a restock. In the end, and I had absolutely no clue that we would actually be so successful in finishing enough knives, but we finished 45 knives and launched with 45 knives, and my head just exploded. I was following the back end of my website, checking stats, and those 45 knives sold out in 10 minutes. And that alone was just wow. But I could see every active shopping cart on my site, and within the first 2 or 3 minutes, we had between 100 and 200 active shopping cart at once, which also meant that we broke the internet and oversold, even though it's not supposed to be possible, but we oversold by 3 pieces. Luckily, we had those parts prepared. So within a couple of days, we could finish those 3 knives and have those shipped out as well. We launched on a Thursday, and already on Friday we shipped a bunch, and Karina worked all weekend. Every AROS was shipped Monday morning, which in itself was a pretty incredible thing for us, because for shipping 48 packages plus whatever other orders got in through that weekend is more than we normally handle in one shipping day. So that was just fantastic. Success like that is also somewhat of a double-edged sword though, because with 48 happy customers, I had at least 100 people who got the shopping cart sniped from the AROS that they thought they were about to buy. That's just the way that the website is built. You can add your product to the shopping cart, but it's not yours until you actually pay for it. We've had similar experiences before with my online knife show, Launch 15, where a lot of people are trying to buy too few products. And it's just the way of the game for custom knives. But should it be the way for a shop-built knife? I'm not sure, but I thought that was a very good idea. So with a project like the AROS, and we're producing so many parts, you have to organize it somehow, especially now that we are taking orders, but also before, when I would just plan out a production amount of knives. So what we do here is we have these wooden trays where we line out the parts. Right now it's only the handles, but eventually we'll have all the parts for 6 AROSes lined out in this tray. We 3D printed these small trays where we can put screws and washers and bearings and stop pins and buttons and all that out. So everything is visually available, so you can see if anything is missing for that specific 1 AROS. There's actually an interesting anecdote with these trays, because we've for a good number of years had the need to organize ourselves in the shop when we produce parts and products. For instance, this tray is handles for the Astra project. This is a shorter handle in titanium. This is some of the accessories for the AROS. But having these trays that are stackable is just super handy. And the origin of this tray, and you can actually see the color difference here between this and this, came from an auction from one of Denmark's oldest company that went out of business a few years ago. It was an ammunition factory, and I went to an auction to buy among other things, that whole dust system over here or fume system. But I got home with a huge trailer full of stuff. And in all of that was 3 or 4 of these trays that in production of ammunition, if it was handgun ammunition or whatever they used it for, I have no idea. Custom made by them to serve a specific purpose. But we just found that those 3 trays worked tremendously well with our production of small parts. So we started building more trays, and they are actually fitting together now. They're stackable. So a maybe somewhat random product made in a different factory, I would guess 50 years ago or more, is now being actively used in my production here. And Henrik, who's our in-house carpenter, he is right now building 30 more of these, so I think we'll have close to 70 of these trays just spread around production. After the successful launch, we were able to go back and analyze our process and do some needed changes here and there, and then start working towards the first restock. I planned for having 2 restocks in December after the launch. 1 week after the launch, and then again 1 week after that as well. That all went to crap. Both because of the challenges we had in production, where they just seemed to multiply. We solved one thing only to discover another. And then came what could have been a massive disaster, and probably what has stressed me absolutely the most in my entire career. One of my fears has always been, what happens if I send out a faulty product? What happens if I send out something where I need to do a callback of some kind? Just imagine one of the big car companies and they sell 1 million cars and suddenly the door fell off when you reach 100 miles an hour or whatever, and you have to call back 1 million cars. That's definitely not what we're talking about here. But as people were starting to receive the AROS, I was starting to hear here and there with some issues with the AROS. Luckily, I tested every single AROS that went out here. I flipped every single one, and I will continue to do that because in the end, the buck ends with me. I'm responsible for whatever we ship out. It's my name on the blade. This is my product. It's my team who builds it, but it's my product. So it was crucial for me to test and feel and inspect every single knife. Does it mean that I can't make a mistake? Of course not. So my team is 3 guys and myself. Each knife was flipped by at least 3 people. We all agreed that this was a great mechanism. Maybe a little stiffer than I'm used to, but we all agreed this is a great mechanism. And I'm not sure exactly what caused this to be an issue to begin with. Small flipper tab, or the fact that we were working with a new mechanism, the button lock, but people were having difficulties flipping them. And I was just completely puzzled about it, because we've tested these for so long. I carried this for at least 2 months before launch, never saw any issues whatsoever. But then I started investigating and seeing, okay, what is it that is causing the problem? And quite fast I realized that the spring behind the button in the mechanism simply was too strong. It was pushing against the blade and the chassis with too much force, and that created not only one but several issues. One issue was that the flipping action simply was too crisp. We work with machinery all day, so maybe we have a little more hard skin on our fingers. Maybe we're just used to this mechanism. Whatever it is, reality just showed that a bunch of people out there were having difficulties. At first I was a little reluctant or skeptic about it, so I made an instruction video just showing, okay, so when you flip it, just do this. And that helps some. Then I started writing out to each customer, and I was really happy it was only 48. That's still a lot of correspondence, I can tell you that. But I reached out to every single customer who got an AROS in the first batch, because I realized, okay, it's the spring that is causing the issue. We need to solve that. So at first I reached out to every single customer to establish knowledge about the extent of the issues. And in the end, it turned out that about 3/4 of the 48 had issues. And then I started working with each of them, trying to figure out how to solve it. Most of them would be able to solve the spring issue by me sending a new spring, and they could take it apart and it's reassembled. And that solved the majority of the problems. Then there was a handful who would be more comfortable with me changing the spring. So we started arranging for people to ship the knives back. And then I started investigating, what should we do? How do we get a new spring like this? And out of the blue came our savior in this project, really. One of our customers, Russ, went ahead and drove to McMaster Car, which is a very, very big, I would like to call it hardware store in lack of better terms. It's probably not the right word, and then he bought a selection of springs after carefully measuring the spring in the AROS, the original spring, and then he started measuring out and investigating in torque and pressure per pound per pressure. Yeah, he started looking into stuff that I had very little knowledge about. And then he bought a selection of springs and then started testing them out. And then he found one that to him felt perfect. He gave me the part number. I ordered 300 springs, did extensive testing, and found that that was the perfect spring for our purpose. So thank you, Russ, for helping out in a point where it was very, very much needed. Thank you so much. With the tray system we have in place here, we also created these spreadsheets of assignments for whatever we put in the tray. In this case, it's AROS handles in fiber. And I put in fiber just because I know we will be making these in metal eventually. On these, we have the process each part needs to go through in order to become a part for the final knife. We have bead blasting, we have tumbling, we have ultrasonic cleaning, we have spraying with WD-40. Every single task that a part needs to go through, we've documented here in order for us to keep track of every single tray in production, so we know exactly where it is, who did what and when. And that's something that has been needed in order both to track down if there's any issues with a part. It's easier for us to track down, okay, when was this produced? Was it before or after we made this change in the program? Or just one of the guys get in at 6 a.m. and he sees this tray and he can see exactly where it was left off the day before. So little things like this just helps tremendously in planning a production and keeping track of production. So now all the 48 knives are solved, which is amazing. But we were getting very, very close to Christmas holiday, and my team was going on a 2 weeks break or 10 days break, but we hadn't had a restock yet. Throughout my career, I've worked every single weekend and holidays, you have it, up until some years ago where I decided, okay, I think I've reached a point where I should start working a somewhat more realistic work week. And I actually plan to take a substantial amount of time off between Christmas and New Year. I can't sit on my hands though, so I planned that I had a lot of tidying up in my workshop to do and less mundane stuff, but things that I tend to push forward. And well, plans changed. And the last week before Christmas, it was Christian from the team and myself in the workshop, just preparing parts, and preparing for my work week between Christmas and New Year, where I had to put as many knives together as possible, simply to get that restock happening, not to let people wait. Did it have a financial meaning to the company? Sure, it did as well. So there was a lot at stake here. So I worked a bunch. I ran the CNCs through the weekend, so I had parts for my custom knives because, again, as I said, the machines right now are the bottleneck. And we reached December 29th and we put out, or I put out really, 53 AROS. And we sold out like that. The 53 AROS that went out were all assembled by me, all sharpened by me, all quality checked by me. And it felt so good to actually be able to just put that out for sale. If you want to support this channel, you can visit my website right now and order your AROS. I actually divided the restock in two in order to favor some of our friends and customers in Asia and Australia. So I had, through the day, I had 2 launches or 2 restocks. And the first restock sold out in 10 minutes and the second sold out in 4 minutes. And again, we made 53 customers happy, but at the same time, we made more than 100 potential customers annoyed. A few of you actually wrote me and told me about their dislike to drops and restocks like this. And one of the things that I think is one of my forces in doing business is that I can take decisions very quickly. I will change direction very quickly. So I talked with my wife Karina and we discussed it back and forth and actually decided that it was time to accept orders. Orders means that you wait a bit longer, but you're actually able to secure a spot. So on January 3rd, we opened up the order book for the AROS. Now recording on the 16th, January 16th, the order book is still open and I envision that it will be open for a substantial amount of time. This project has just shown to be so popular and I don't see that stopping. So I want to be able to satisfy as many customers out there as possible. By now we have 100 AROS out there. On January 3rd, we received around 130 orders, and since then we've received many more. And now we're just planning production and trying to plan out of bottlenecks. Another super important planning tool for me and for production, not only for the AROS, but I've been using this program which is called Trello, and it has become such an important tool for me. I've been using it for 18 months by now, give or take, and I plan out every single thing that we make here is planned out in detail in Trello. What you're looking at here is actually the each specific CNC machine line out for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, just in order for us to handle that. Right now the machines are the bottleneck. Our success is dependent on how much are we able to get through these machines it's not been needed before because the machines has never been the bottleneck, but now is. For instance, today is Tuesday, we're doing some soft milling of some blades, and then after hours we're running side 2 of the chassis and side 2 of the spacer. And at first it seemed almost excessive for me to go that deep into planning, but we just found that it's so needed in order to get the most out of every single hour of the day. And Trello is just a tremendous help here. It feels so great that throughout December we were just standing at the start line and we could just see this massive success right here, but we couldn't get past the start line. It was just being held back. Reaching this point, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. Well. This project is so important for me, and that whole journey of emotions and learning so much and taking so much in has just caused me to. I don't even have words for this, but I'm just so happy about the place that we've reached with this project. It's the first of its kind. It's the first folder that's being shop built. First folder that is made here in my shop without my involvement. Well, so far I've been super involved, and I will continue to be involved, but I will be less involved. I also learned that with the many years of experience, I didn't necessarily pick the right route. I thought that, okay, I will teach my team to build folders and then I'll step back. But I also learned by this process that I have so much to give and so much to teach, and I have so much experience with the process that I can't just teach that in one setting or several settings. I need to be a constant part of the process. So what I decided to do is actually take part of every single process on a continuous basis so I can continue to improve the process. The guys will also improve the process, but me being part of the constant process is super important. What we're doing here is we're checking blades for straightness. While assembling knives, we make sure that the blade is exactly in the center of the frame. If a blade is uncentered, there can be several different reasons for this, but number one should be that we have a perfectly straight blade. And the sooner in the process that you can detect something, the less money that part will cost you, or the easier it is to fix that part. So here we have the Mitutoyo height gauge, and we are checking if the edge of the blade is in center, and if it's not, we actually have means to straighten that up. But this is just one of those processes that we created in order to establish a superior product. So every single process gets analyzed, and then we take 3 steps back and see what can we do better, where can we do better. And in this case, rather than figuring out that a blade is not perfectly straight while you're assembling a knife, we are actually taking care of that right out of the machine. So that is both saving us time, but also ensuring that we are dealing with the right amount of tolerance in this part as early as possible. The machines being the bottleneck has actually demanded more attention from my part in planning out production. We have roughly 8 to 10 hours of production time during the day while the team is in the shop, but then we have 14 hours where the machines potentially could just be standing still. About a year ago, or maybe a year and a half, we started developing a system where we could machine after hours, so we get the most out of the machines. So now we're actually machining 10, 12, 14 hours after normal work hours with the machines being unmanned. That is what's saving us really now. But also because that the parts right now and the machines right now are the bottleneck, it just needs so careful planning. So that's what I'm doing Sunday night right now is I sit down, I take the VF2, I plan out what needs to be run on Monday during the day, what needs to be run Monday during the evening, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then I move on to the mini mill, what needs to be produced on this one. Now we're actually establishing some continuity with production. My goal is that we run a week, and when we reach Friday, we have X amount of parts that will mount to X amount of knives, complete knives. And then we redo that exact same thing the next week and the next week. And then we make small improvements. So the number of finished knives per week will grow. But from experience, I learned that it doesn't make sense to produce chassis for a month and then move on to clips and spacer. And then after X amount of weeks or months, then you start assembly. We've tried that, and then you don't catch those small variations in tolerances, which can be disasterful because then you have to trash full production. So by doing what we do now, we will catch the small variations. We will be able to do small changes to the parts as needed. And I think we're on to a super good process here. So this process here is actually a super interesting and one that was introduced to me only about 6 months ago. And it's a off-the-rack standard ball peen hammer, but it's been modified with a tungsten carbide ball that has been soldered into place here. The tungsten carbide is much harder than the hardened blade, which means that you can actually peen the blade, and by doing so you can straighten it from side to side. It's only today or yesterday that we started thinking about we could actually straighten a blade that's already been milled. Up until now we've been straightening blades that are heat treated but not surface ground yet, in order to get whatever curve that might have gotten into the blade during heat treat. We can take that out with the pen and really simply describe, if I put a dent on this side of the blade, you're stretching the surface, and by doing so you're bending the surface. We're actually trying to do the same now with the blades that are milled. Once you're milling the blade, maybe you have some tension inside the steel that are getting released once you mill off the majority of the steel here, and that might cause the blade to bow. And by such a simple tool here, you're actually able to save the blade, which again is something a week ago I had no idea we would start using a process like this, but having the tool at hand and the mindset that we are able to just change and solve and learn, it's fantastic. Two of my very good friends, Lucas Burnley and TJ Schwartz, run a podcast, a bi-weekly podcast, I think it is, called Edge and Flow. If you don't know it, go and give them a listen. It's great. TJ has been talking a lot about the process is the product. And now I'm actually starting to see that much more than I did 6 months ago. The process is the product. Once you have established a well-oiled machine being the process, now you can start actually moving very fast. And that's super exciting. So here we have one of the parts where we really had to invent a new system for us to keep track of tolerances. If you just machine a part from one side, tolerances are relatively easy to maintain. But the moment that you machine a part from two sides, if you have a part that is misaligned by X amount of millimeters, say if you have a misalignment by 1/100th of a millimeter, that's so small that even the heat from your hands will go in and change measurement just from you heating up your measuring tools. But let's see, 2.5 hundredths, that's 1 thou. And you change that to the other side, now you have 5 hundredths or 2 thou. So everything that you do, that you flip over, you are doubling up on the misguidance or the tolerances. So what we did here, and that's something completely new, but we are putting it into every single product that we make here, is we added this guide hole here. It's just a regular machined hole, and up here we have a guide plane. We run the Mitutoyo indicator up, centering above this hole, and then we check if it sits in perfect center of position. Now when we flip it, we were trusting these bolts here to have exact position, but now we actually have this hole that we can index from. And if it's out of whack, we can just change coordinates in the machine, or we can just tap it slightly with a hammer until it gets into position. And that has now saved us hundreds of hours of machining just from parts that we are actually certain are to spec before we even hit the button. And that's fantastic.
What?
Yeah. That, and we are also pulling some tricks that are definitely not regular machinist learning, but knife maker learning from running a CNC for 15 years with absolutely no prior education. I've been doing things for so many years because it worked for me, but every time I've told the machinist that we run an end mill like this, I was like, no, you can't do that. That's against the rules. Well, nobody told me the rules, so we just do that. So one of the things that we do is we do rough machining and then finishing cuts with a fresh end mill. But then we actually go in and do a second finishing run with a third end mill, and it's actually just running in air. It's running on the measurement, and you're not allowed to do that if you ask a machinist, but we do it in case just a tiny corner of an end mill, if that's broken off, you might not always catch that, even if you inspect the part with magnifying glass and all that, but that might change the tolerances tremendously. So by going in and remachining, and I say remachining, actually refinishing with a fresh end mill, it's just a precaution in case the previous end mill broke off a tooth. And it's saving us tons of hours. I hope you enjoyed looking a bit behind the scenes on everything that is going on and has been going on with the AROS project. It has been crazy 2 months. Tragedy plus time equals comedy, and at this point I can actually start laughing a little bit about those past 2 months. They have been insane. I know we are not in the clear yet. Whenever you're working on something, there's always new things that can go wrong. Today, we have a technician on the surface grinder trying to fix some stuff. Only just today, we finally proved one of the programs to run the clips after some changes. Every day is a new day, every day is new challenges, and I love it. I think I've learned quite a bit by now, so I won't mind if we could have a couple of quiet months. I know it won't happen, but well. And the most important thing, the order book for the AROS, it's now open. So if you want to support this channel and help keep the light on, visit my website. There's a link below directly to the AROS. You can custom fit with color of choice for the hardware. Handle materials, right now we have 7 different handle materials, and you can pick 3 different colors for the hardware. It is, in my opinion, the perfect everyday carry folder, and I think maybe you will think so as well. I hope you enjoyed this episode. This was one of the longer ones, and if you stayed this long, you're a true knife geek, just like me, and I salute you. Leave a comment, hit like, tell your friends. Please help this channel to grow, and I will do my best to continue to make very interesting content for you. If you leave a comment, I will answer. Maybe not immediately, but I will answer. And until next time, see you later.